Welcome to video number 3. As with all my videos, this one will be entirely unscripted, based entirely on what happens to be in here. Unlike the previous videos, I'm going to try to keep this one short. I had originally wanted to do a video on passive voice, but I realized that, in effect, many students do not quite understand verbs themselves. So it was a debate as to whether or not I would do a video on categories of verbs, meaning action, dynamic, or stative. But I've settled on dealing with transitivity, which is a huge problem for many students, particularly when dealing with passive voice. So I think that it's just best to start with transitivity. Let the students watch this video, and then later deal with passive voice, which is infinitely more complex, although not quite so difficult as students think. So the key issue of transitivity is that it sounds really cool. Transitivity, it sounds like something almost spiritual. Transcendentalism, transitivity, all the same. No. Transitivity is a nice word for a very simple concept. And the concept is something is changed. That's it. That's what transitivity means. Something is changed. So, all verbs are transitive or intransitive, one or the other. Some verbs have both forms. Okay? Now, let me start with a verb that has both forms. Okay? Walk. I walk. In that case, the verb is intransitive because nothing is affected by my walking. Even if I walk on something, the on something is just an adverb of place. Okay, it's a prepositional phrase that works as an adverb of place. Okay, or in some place, once again, prepositional phrase working as an adverb of place. Okay, there, just a pronoun working as an adverb of, hey, you guessed it, place. So, basically speaking, I walk. I walked there. I walked in the park. I walked on the sidewalk. Nothing has changed. And not at all. So, in that case, walk is intransitive. So, I said that walk has a transitive form. Well, here it is. I walked the dog, or I walked my dog yesterday. Okay? So, the dog is changed because the dog might have walked, but it wouldn't have necessarily walked where you wanted it to walk. Okay? So if I say the dog walked or the dog was walking, then that's once again intransitive. But if I say I walked the dog, it means that, excuse me for saying this, I forcibly made the dog go somewhere. Okay? So, the dog was changed by my action. Whether or not the dog was going to walk is not important. The fact is that it walked where I made it walk. So, once again, that would get us into another grammar concept, which is causative structure. Okay, we'll get to that in a future video. So making somebody do something, or making something do something. But let's just keep it simple here. Transitivity refers to the idea of changing an object. And that object, which is changed, is called the direct object. And when we get to passive voice, you're going to hear direct object and indirect object a lot. But right now we're going to ignore indirect object and stick with direct object, the object that is changed. So, coffee. So, I drank some coffee. And you see, I'm the subject, standard sentence structure. Drink is a transitive verb, even if it's only implied. Like, for example, he drinks, which is the local sign for alcoholic, okay? Still implies that he drinks alcohol, okay, and regularly. So, but usually we're more specific so that we don't, say, confuse people. So, I drink some coffee. So, coffee is the direct object. Yes, there is an adjective, some, a quantitative adjective. So, it becomes a noun phrase, but the direct object itself is still coffee. So, in Russian, there are many words that end in sa, which are not transitive, like случается, умирается. Okay, so many Russian speakers mistranslate these as "it is happened" or "he is died." Okay, so but there's no direct object. Okay, so I can say the crash happened. Okay, but you can't happen anything. Okay, it's not a push, it's not a lift, it's not any sort of change. Okay, it's just an occurrence. Okay, so you can't dye somebody unless you mean dye to change the color of, but die is intransitive. He died. He could have been killed, and kill is transitive. So, for example, the serial killer killed many people. Okay, the many people would be the direct object, and therefore kill is transitive. So, even if we just say he kills, the implication is that somebody is killed. There is a direct object implied. Some verbs even have the direct object within the verb itself, like to inform or to help. If I say I helped him, many people think he is the direct object. In reality, it's I gave help to him, or I informed him. I gave information to him. Perhaps a second example is a bit better. Okay? Because how can, if I say I informed him, okay, so am I really changing him? We can make an argument to say that he is now not so ignorant as he was before, but in general, no. The information is changing from my person to his person. Just like if I say, I gave a book to him. Okay? So the book is changing from my person to his person. I am an adverb of place. He is an adverb of place. Technically speaking, he's the indirect object. If we were dealing with passive voice, we would talk more about this. In fact, I'll use the same example when I deal with passive voice because I've got the Russian version memorized so well. So, I gave a book to him, and that book is changed because it's no longer with me. Okay, it's no longer at my adverb of place, it's at his adverb of place. So, in Russian, я дал ему книгу. Hey, pretty good, huh? So, once again, we can see the ему, the indirect object in Russian for he or on. Okay, but kniga becomes knigу. Okay, to show that this feminine object, and for some reason books in Russian are feminine, is changed. Okay, so it's basically exactly the same. So in Russian, students basically need to watch out for things that don't have changes, like случается, умирается, okay, and focus entirely on transitivity with regards to something being changed. And with feminine singular objects like kniga, like book, it's easy, okay? Other times it's not so easy, especially with masculine objects, which in the case of the singular don't change suffixes in the what's called the accusative declension. Okay, once again, that's maybe a little bit complicated, but we'll just deal with it. So let's look back at the first premise. Transitivity means that something is changed. Okay, if the verb is intransitive, nothing is changed. I walk, I live. Sometimes we have verbs that have both forms. Okay, so we could take this and say, I walked a dog. Okay, so he lives somebody else's life. Okay, but if I just talk about me, I walk, I live, then no direct object, no transitivity. So, course, many action verbs themselves, and in fact, many dynamic verbs, and some of the stative verbs. Well, let's just put it this way. All of the stative verbs are transitive, but in a different way. The direct object for stative verbs is called the complement, with an E, not an I. Okay? So, for example, I am a teacher, you are a student. Okay? Technically speaking, according to grammarians, they call that the direct object, teacher, student. But it's got another name to show how unclear the idea of transitivity here really is. It's called a complement. So, in effect, I don't really consider stative verbs to be transitive. Okay? I consider them to have an object, but it's not a direct object because it's not being changed. Okay? So ignore the structure of stative verbs. We will deal with stative verbs in the future. Okay? Think now that transitivity involves something being changed. Okay? I drank some coffee, I turned on the light, and yes, phrasal verbs like turn on, take off, beat up can be transitive. Okay? So ignore the preposition at the end, which is actually called an adverbial particle. Okay? And just focus on the fact that the verb changes something. Turning on a light means that the light is no longer dim. Turning off the light means that it's no longer bright. Beating somebody up means that that person is no longer in physical health. Okay? So putting clothes on means that the clothes are no longer off. Okay? So, transitivity. Think about whether or not something is being changed. If so, even if it's just being moved, okay, then it's the direct object and the verb is transitive. Okay? And that's all I have to say about this. Transitivity means something is changed. Well, thanks for watching.